is bad, super bad.
I told them no, no, it's from creation. I told them no, no, it's from creation. Bam, bam, hey, what a bam, 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 dilang, bam, 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 dilang, bam, bam, hey, what a bam, bam, ta what a bam, bam. This woman never trouble no one. I'm a lady, I'm not a man. MC is my ambition. I come free nice of Jamaican. So bam bam, ta what a bam bam, bam bam dilang, bam bam, bam bam dilang, bam bam. Hey yo, I me say what a bam bam. Tell me say what a bam bam. Hey yo, tell them.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Night School. I'm Lynn.
And I'm Christina.
And we're part of the Nightlife team at Cal Academy in San Francisco. For those of you new to Nightlife and Night School, Nightlife is our weekly Thursday night events where we mix science with a little live music and cocktails. Last year, we moved it online with Night School, so you're able to get a little taste of nightlife at home while you're eating dinner or comfy on your couch. We are just about at the year mark for bringing Nightlife online. And one silver lining I know me and Christina always agree on is that we get to spend Thursday nights with you. So thanks for being here with us. We love it and we love you guys. We have a very special Night School tonight. For the last few years, we've been celebrating International Women's Day with a specially themed Women in Science Nightlife in person. Not that we need a specific day to celebrate these amazing women, but this year, International Women's Day is on Monday, March 8th. And tonight, we are thrilled to be bringing together some incredible, accomplished women to talk about their work and what it's like to be women in science in 2021.
And we're going to introduce you to these scientists in a little bit, but first, we're going to introduce you to our host for the evening, Allie Ward. Allie is also in the STEM field. She's a science communicator, and you may have heard her fantastic science podcast, Ologies. I know that a lot of us at the Academy are listeners and have been on her podcast too. And you might have seen her on CBS's Innovation Nation or as the host of Did I Mention Invention on the CW. And she was also notably the moderator for our Women in Science Nightlife last year, which also was the very last in-person event before we closed. So full circle, kind of, I don't know.
Full circle.
But we'll have some time for Q&A with our panel at the end of the evening. So like every night school event, get those questions in throughout the evening. And then without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Allie Ward. There she is.
Hi.
Hi.
Everyone. I'm seeing y'all in the chat are saying where you're from. It's really great to see everyone from, all parts of the globe right now. Thank you, Lynn and Christina, so much for having me back.
Yeah.
I hold it in such fondness in my heart. Last year's event, which was the last time I left the house, probably.
Yes.
So,
yes.
yeah.
Well, we'll let you take it from here and have fun.
All right. See you soon. So yes, it's been a year almost to the day that we were at the California Academy of Sciences hosting a panel live with people in the same room. I remember at the time, I think we were doing a lot of elbow bumps and a lot of like toe kicks instead of handshakes, thinking that would probably solve everything. But we're gearing up, hopefully the close of this journey of our lives. But it's really great to be back. It's great to be back talking to so many wonderful scientists, and I get to chat with them and ask them questions, which is what I love to do most in my life. So if you've listened to the Ologies podcast, you may have heard some California Academy of Sciences scientists on there as well. And so this is kind of me sneaking into your nightlife and asking questions of some really great scientists. And right now, first up, we're going to talk to two amazing scientists who have a little bit in common with their fields. First one is Dr. Melanie Malone, who's an assistant professor in the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences at the University of Washington, Bothell. And so joining us cosmically from the Pacific Northwest. And Dr. Melanie Malone her research draws on critical physical geography to examine the biophysical, institutional, political, and cultural dynamics of environmental challenges. And I absolutely needed to read that from my notes because it's a lot of words and I'm very curious to have her explain all about her life and her work. And in previous years, she's worked as an environmental geologist in the Portland Harbor Superfund site cleaning up contamination. We will ask her about that as well. We're also joined by Dr. Suzanne Pierce, who is the director of the Critical Ecology Lab, also a 2021 OSHA Fellow at the California Academy of Sciences and a visiting researcher at UC Berkeley. And Dr. Pierre is a global change ecologist, a biogeochemist, and an environmental educator. And her scientific expertise centers on climate change and the chemical interaction between plants and microbes and the non-living environment. And she is currently a visiting researcher in the Department of Integrative Biology at the University of California, Berkeley. And Dr. Pierre is the founder and director of the Critical Ecology Lab, which is a nonprofit research group that collaborates with academic and community-based organizations. So we are going to talk to them and have them talk to each other about their work. I'm really excited. Hi. Dr. Malone, Dr. Pierre, hello.
Hello, great to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. First off, I'm just going to ask, it's a Thursday, it's after hours, we're at night school, this is a nightlife event. What were your days like before you hopped on to this to this call? What were you working on?
Oh shoot, gosh, I was probably editing some paper that I've been editing for too long, and then just like closing the lid of my laptop occasionally, and being like, "What am I doing?" Melanie was probably doing something more interesting.
Well, I don't know if it was more interesting, but it was more hectic. Maybe I was going back and forth between office hours, classes, answering emails. It's my typical Thursday this quarter.
Busy, I imagine. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hustle.
One thing I think is so interesting about what you both do is this involves soil, microbes. Can you tell me a little bit about, if you have to explain at a dinner party, what your work deals with? Dr. Malone, how do you describe it?
So I don't do too much on soil microbes. I do a lot of stuff with soil science in general. And my particular area of like expertise is how contaminants move through soils and then figuring out if they poison people. So that's what I've done for a long time. I love soils greatly, and they do a lot of good things for us and the planet. And so I love studying them and then seeing what's in them. And so my current research looks at contaminants in community gardens around Seattle and Brooklyn, New York. And so a lot of what I spend my time doing is, yes, it's showing people what soils look like in their gardens, what they should look out for, textures of their soils, and then also sharing with them the results of my contaminant testing. So I do a lot of different things with like testing things that you might know about, like arsenic and lead. A lot of people have heard about those, but a lot of people also don't know that there's motor oil in their soils or diesel in their soils, Roundup in their soils. So that's in a nutshell. And I do a lot of talking with folks about that, discussing how they can keep themselves safe. So that's the very short story of it all.
And so you both are soil scientists to a degree, would you say?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you get a lot of texts from friends being like, why aren't my carrots growing? Does it happen a lot?
I leave people on red with that. I'm really just like, that's simply not something I can offer you. I hear you, I feel it, but like, talk to you later.
I would agree with that sentiment.
You're like, it's a little bit, maybe perhaps below my pay grade. Google it.
No, I'm like, I keep killing these plants. It's so embarrassing.
Hey, I feel like plants are harder to take care of than animals at times. Like I've killed plenty of succulents during the last year, just wishing them nothing but the best. But and so Dr. Malone, you're looking for contaminants in community gardens, and Dr. Pierre, am I saying your last name right? I feel like I accidentally read it.
The first time you didn't, but I was like, look at her, she saved it. Yes, Pierre.
Did I say Pierce? Did I read it as Pierce?
It happens constantly. I like almost didn't notice. I was like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry.
It came out of my mouth and I was like, who put a C in that? Not
Honestly,
me.
I'm like, Allie Ward mispronounced my name. Like, I'm a fangirl. It's fine.
It came out of my mouth and I was like, I didn't put a C in there. But Dr. Pierre, do you have to, when you're researching, and can you tell us a little bit about, you do work with microbes in soil, I understand, and especially with oak trees. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I love talking about this. Yes. So yeah, I do study soil microbes. Microbes in general, I'm a big fan. And as you mentioned, I'm a biogeochemist. So like Melanie, I study soils, but I really think about the elements and kind of the molecules made up of those elements and how they kind of circulate through the environment. And microbes are, fascinating in their like individual specificities, but they're also kind of like this pump for the elements that really fuel our forests, grasslands, etc. And oak savannas are one of the systems that I care a lot about. And I'm based in the Bay Area of California, so that's part of why I focus on that system.
Do you think that perhaps where you grew up influenced how you felt about gravitating toward soil science or earth science? Tell me a little bit about what I always like to hear. Like, what kind of kids were you? Did you have like dirt under the fingernails, mud on the pants, or when did you start getting interested in earth?
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Sue, or?
You go for it, Melanie.
Okay.
Like, I gotta think about this.
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of time outside, and it's funny, I didn't ever think I was going to end up back in like agricultural stuff, but I was always outside, especially with my dad. My dad loved the garden, and he was just like always outside doing something. And so I didn't think I was necessarily going to end up in soils, but in hindsight, I was like, yeah, I was always like making mud balls or like playing in a stream. And I remember early on, like one of my older sisters was like, oh my goodness, you can't eat out of styrofoam. And it just stayed with me. and I was very impacted by that. And I was like, okay, like, what do I do about that? Like, how can I study this? And so, just little experiences here and there, I think led me to where I am now, whether or not I knew I was gravitating towards that. It's taken me a long time of going through things too that I didn't know, or I thought I wanted to do. Like I thought originally I wanted to like work in the Amazon, but I'm really terrified of snakes. So I was like, nope, not doing that. I took a trip on like my first research trip was like to study coral reefs. And I was like, okay, I'm actually kind of scared of things that will eat me in the ocean. So like it was an evolving process to how I got to now.
And what about you, Dr. Pierre? How did
gosh, I was like, I don't think I had a particular path that was like based in my home life. I mean, so I'm at my parents' house right now, so I'm really literally looking around and being like, where was I when I first was like digging in the soil? So I guess we have a lot of like yard around us, and my parents literally to this day will not like get out of the yard. They like get home from work and put on their work clothes and go back outside. So that was my upbringing. And so I guess we were always just kind of outside. I guess one thing that I know is that I like went camping and hiking and stuff for the first time in high school. And before that, I was into the outdoors and into nature. But after this experience of just kind of having like a lot of like, over a week just being outside, I just kind of felt like, wow, this is my comfort zone. And whatever else is out here, I want to find out. I wasn't sure that it was necessarily soil, but yeah, I'm just kind of a dirt kid. So that's what I'll say.
I love that. Like you need a dirt kid sticker for everyone who works in soil science.
Yes, absolutely.
And both of you work on really small levels of the soil in terms of what's in there chemically, what's in there that's alive, that are microbes. Can you both tell me a little bit about how looking at things on a really tiny level impacts or tells us more about the Earth as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with that. So a lot of the reason that I do my current research in gardens is because they're such key indicators of what's going on in social justice. A lot of people, do urban gardening because they're doing it for resistance and movements back to land and all these other things. But they're also in like these very historically contaminated locations because there's spaces that they've reclaimed, used to be maybe old housing developments, used to be industrial places, used to be old housing that had lead or whatever, And so even though these chemicals, you don't see them readily in the soil, they're very much a symptom of greater societal problems that we have going on. And so the most contaminated spaces I find always are the places you suspect, right? The highly diverse areas, the places that don't have that much money, the places that have historically been industrial. So that's how that reflects a lot of that. And yeah, those are some of my community partners. I specifically work in gardens that have a lot of high racial and ethnic diversity because it's already established that those toxic things are going on. But what's not known is how toxic they are. And a lot of communities aren't told about those things. And so that's what I see my role in doing this research is.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I imagine that there's so much sociology and economics and so much more than just soil science that you've kind of got to bring into your research too. And asking the right questions as a scientist is absolutely what drives your science and drives your discoveries, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I talk about. And one of the reasons that I, gravitate towards my field of critical physical geography, because it actually inserts those questions of why I ask the questions that I do. And so I'm very aware that, as a female and as a person of color, that I ask a lot of questions that other people, especially like, powerful old white males, corporations and things like that, don't ask because all of these people are marginalized, right? And so they need oftentimes somebody to ask those questions and somebody to have the credentials in order to have a lot of their questions answered.
Oh, that's amazing. That's exactly why scientists' perspectives and point of views can influence so much of what we know, is asking the right questions. And Dr. Pierre, can you talk a little bit about how your work with the soil microbiome, what that tells you about what Earth is doing?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing I'll say is that microbes can be sort of a litmus test for how fast things are moving, how quickly things are moving around in the environment. And so they are in the soil, they're in other parts of the environment as well. and they kind of operate like pumps, right? Like they're alive and they're or organisms, but they are also sort of this little shuttle of elements from place to place. And so we can look at the microbial community not only in terms of who is there, but really what functions they perform. And that's kind of the approach in biogeochemistry that I take, is looking at microbes as kind of an indicator of the recycling that's happening in all these parts of the environment. And so why that matters, really similarly to Melanie's work, is that you can look at soil contaminants as an indicator of what's happening to people, but you can also look at microbes and nutrient cycling as an indicator of kind of what the metabolism of the whole ecosystem is doing. And for me, that's really important because the metabolism of an ecosystem is really related to climate change and other aspects of environmental change. And the reason that that matters to me, going back to what Melanie said really well, is kind of like there are questions about that particular aspect of the environment and global change that people who have historically dominated these fields have never thought to ask. And people like myself, women and Black people, people of color, and queer people are asking questions, I think now, that relate to these mechanisms that are kind of driving the environment that haven't really been asked before. So that's part of my work.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you ever rely on the science that each one is working on? Do you have to look at soil contaminants if you're looking at microbes? Do you have to look at microbes if you're looking at is there a microbe that eats motor oil? Like, what do you learn from your disciplines from each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, there is a lot of, doing research, especially when you're interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, like Sue and I. There's a lot of, you can't just do science in a vacuum. Nobody, people tell you this, but this is not how it works. So I definitely think about that. That's actually one of the things one of my community partners has like really gotten into, is like asking, are there microbes that we can use, or can we use, microremediation? So, I was like, when I met Sue, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to talk to Sue about that. So there's all these things. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, call me. Mm-hmm. What about is there advice that you would give to yourself, maybe as you were an early career researcher, when you were starting your journey in science, that if you could wiggle through like a wardrobe and just come back to yourself in undergrad or early grad, that you would say, hey, any advice that you would give yourself or others? It's going to be like, don't eat sushi from 7-Eleven, number one.
I knew that. Come on. Wegmans is where it's at. Shout out to Wegmans for supporting me throughout my graduate career. That's what I'll say. Please sponsor me.
You're gonna have to get a Wegmans tattoo somewhere, but it's gonna be fine.
It's already no, just kidding. I'll keep my shirt on. My advice to myself would have been, so I don't know, I won't speak for Melanie, but I suspect that there are some overlaps, but we both come from these kind of like earth science disciplines, which are exceptionally homogenous in terms of race, and it was really a rough time. And there were a lot of times where I had these kind of really different ideas and questions that were interdisciplinary, bringing in questions of critical race theory, thinking about poverty and capitalism and how that relates to environmental science. And I was really discouraged by my seniors and my people that I really looked up to. And I thought, gosh, I must be just like kind of doing it wrong. And like, of course, because I suck. That was like where my head was at then. And I don't think that anymore. And I would definitely go and be like, no, keep thinking about that. Like, keep digging on that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Amen, Sue. That is like so spot on. I went to a very elitist undergrad institution, and, a lot of the students there had gone to like college before they went to college. And so for the first 2 years,
college. What?
Yeah, so a whole different level of like education and things that I had never experienced before, wealth levels and other things, but also the same, like, I guess my advice would be resistance is useful, because it took me a long time, like Sue was describing, to like, figure out that the questions I was asking were not wrong. They just were not, in the system and, you know, the way that other people had thought about them before. And so I'm glad that I always kind of have this stubborn streak to go on, because I just kept going, and, you know, it wasn't always pretty, but I think it was helpful.
Absolutely. What about, you know, final question for this portion. Do you find the more questions that you answer, the more you have? Does that happen to you? Yeah?
Yeah. all of the time. I feel like I just am constantly opening new doors, especially because I work with community partners. And so they will often tell me things that, you know, makes me want to explore something else or informs my research. And so, yeah, I always have that.
Something you like about science? And Dr.
Yeah.
Pierre, does that happen to you as well?
Oh yeah, totally. I'm gonna just go off of Melanie. Like, the people that I interact with are the greatest sources of conversation and discussion. And it's literally like over beers, like I will come up with so many questions and go home and just be like, I have way too much work. What is happening? I cannot answer more questions. But a lot of times it comes from just kind of choosing to talk about my work in places where folks are not doing the same things as me. I end up having incredible conversations with sociologists and archaeologists, and they actually become my collaborators in projects. And you know, those are collaborations that you don't see all the time. So I think just getting out there and interacting with both within academia, other academics, but also just regular people. I think that's where I get a ton of inspiration and thinking.
How about science Twitter? Or are you science TikTokers? Are you science Instagrammers? Are you science live journals? I feel like for me, I'm like still in this like science MySpace or something.
I love your shout out to Live Journal right there. Like I was like, whoa.
What's up, Generation X? where I'm somewhere in between. But yeah, do you have a preferred platform where you have these conversations with other scientists?
I am not so much on Twitter. So Twitter is at least one of 3 sources of anxiety for me. So I'm just kind of like, Twitter, you do you. I'm really going to be over here. But I am on Instagram. So my group, the Critical Ecology Lab, is kind of grew out of Instagram in some ways, which is a really wild thing to think about. So we're at critical_ecology on Instagram. And I'll occasionally tweet when I'm like sedated. But other than that, I kind of stay away from the socials. What about you, Melanie?
Yeah, I'm kind of, you know, I'm in that Zennial generation between millennials and Gen X. So I feel like I'm on Facebook and I have a Twitter account, but I just get exhausted because I get so excited by stuff I see. And then I'm like, but then if I have to retweet that's like a whole other section of my day. And then I'm like feeling anxiety about putting myself out there. And so it's a bit overwhelming for me.
Like, I'm so impressed by nerds who can tweet. Like, I'm like, you guys are calm enough to be tweeting. Like, I'm just trying to read these papers and get through the day.
So people can always probably Google Scholar you and look at what you're working on, and of course go to the websites for the labs that you're at, and we get to talk to you a little bit more later on in the program when we get to have kind of a bigger roundtable and ask, obviously, just probe you for more amazing science advice. But keep up the amazing work. You're both so grounded and down to earth, and all the other earth science puns I can possibly think of. But so for all the girls out there with the dirt under their nails, myself included, thank you for asking the important questions and changing the planet while you're at it. And we get to talk to you in a little bit. And for anyone who is watching along and you have questions for either of those docs, you can put them in the comments, and we have little question goblins who are looking for questions, and they're gonna shoot them to me. So for our roundtable discussion at the end, we get to ask some audience questions. So they're both amazing. Whoever you're at home with, give a big round of applause for Dr. Berlin and Dr. Pierre. Yay! Yay! Look at a plant and say, are they amazing? Or high five your dog. And now we are going to talk to a few more scientists that we're really stoked. Chrissy Garcia is here in a lab. You're going to see a little bit of BTS, a little behind the scenes. She's the collections manager of geology at the California Academy of Sciences, which we love very much. And Chrissy is a geologist, a micropaleontologist. which is a huge word. We'll ask her what that means. And her focus is marine ecosystems, and she oversees the geological research collections at the California Academy of Sciences. And those collections consist of, you ready for this? Approximately 8 million objects. And that ranges from fossil whales to teeny tiny microscopic single-celled organisms and rocks and gems and meteorites, all sorts of things. Chrissy is inspired and motivated by insights the fossil record provides in understanding the past and present and the future environmental change. And she's awesome. We're also going to talk to Dr. Alejandra Hernandez Agreda, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at Reefscape Genomics Lab at the California Academy of Sciences. And she is a marine ecologist interested in the ecological and the distribution and abundance of tropical corals. So she works with corals, and her research focuses on 2 areas: the interactions between corals, microbes, and the environment, and the role of each of those components in corals' health and survival. So we get to talk to them about some marine science and fossils and rocks. So let's welcome them to the show. Well, hello, both of you.
Hi, Allie.
Chrissy, obviously you're coming to us from the lab right now, correct?
I am, yes.
And
2 floors underground at the Cal Academy. Yep.
Is it, I heard that some of the collections are underground just because they're so heavy because they're in jars. Is that true?
No. Okay. But it's a kind of a cute story, but no, it's not quite true. Our dry collections are stored underground, but most of our collections that are in jars are preserved in ethanol, and those are all above ground.
Oh, okay. See, this is news to me. I'm already learning things and I should be taking notes.
So we do, especially in geology.
And Alejandra and Chrissy, does your work ever kind of collide? You both work in marine ecosystems to an extent. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
Allie, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Ali. And hi, everyone that is watching. My name is Alejandra Hernandez, and I work with corals. So corals are those beautiful marine animals that are, well, in the academy, we like to explain that there are 3 things. There are rocks, there are plants, and there are animals. So they're rocks because they have this hard skeleton. They're animals because they're animals indeed. And they're also plants because they're associated to a microalgae. And that microalgae photosynthesize and products of the photosynthesis ended up being like the food of the coral. And I work with them and the microbes that are associated to these organisms. And these organisms are important because they are the base of these BC on the water cities that we know as coral reef. And I'm interested to know how that interaction between the microbes and the corals ended up in being the success of those corals, and how that interaction can how that interaction shapes the survival of these organisms.
So how the microbes and the corals themselves, how they interact, how that benefits them both?
Exactly, yeah. And how that interaction can change depending on where they are, if they are shallow waters or more mesophotic or deep depth, yeah.
And I'm sure there are so many people who don't understand that corals are maybe living at some point. Do you ever have to debunk that? You're
Yes.
like, no, they're alive.
Yes, a lot. And they look static, right? Because they're sessile, but they're actually alive. And the little mouses, if you see closely, you can see them moving and eating sometimes. So yeah, that discussion is something that happens quite a lot. Because people usually think they are rocks, but they're not. Especially at the academy and like in our exhibit floor, quite often that's a discussion.
I bet, yeah. So I'm sure so many people think of coral and they think of them outside of the water and they think of them as rocks. But Chrissy, as the collections manager of geology, you can attest corals, not rocks. Can you tell us a little bit about the very low key collection of 8 million objects? What kind of Excel spreadsheet are you working with?
No Excel. I mean, we use Excel, but that's not where we want to keep our data.
Okay.
Excel is a great tool, but not for long-term storage of data. I won't go into the collection too deep into the collections management side of things. But yeah, I manage the geology collections here. So the geology department is coupled with the Department of Invertebrate Zoology, which is the department that LA is part of, and she's also part of our coral reef team here. So we don't get to intersect all too much, but I have a lot of like research and fieldwork envy for what Ale does, because before I came into this line of work, that was her world that she's working in now, was one that I was super, super interested in. But I ended up going this route, and I'm more of a generalist, and my main day-to-day, day in, day out is managing those 8 million or so estimated specimens that we have in these collections. So the geology collections here are just one of 9 research collections at the Academy. So it may seem like, whoa, 8 million specimens. Well, we estimate at the Academy we have about 46 million specimens. But if you look at collections across the globe, we're talking billions. So that's billions of objects that were collected from a particular place in a particular time, and they have their own story to tell. And all put together, they constitute what many people refer to as the library of life. But I have a good friend and colleague who is a paleontologist, and she has started to explain her work that she's a deep time CSI, crime scene investigator. And so I love that. And I'm like, wait, okay, yeah, we're a library, but actually we're kind of like the evidence locker. Like what happened to what, when, and where? And how do all of these elements come together to tell us the story? And what lessons can we learn? And what information do they hold that can help us make better decisions to preserve life on this planet, including our own human life? So I kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but super generalist. The collections are like super, super broad. So geology is a broad collection here, like you mentioned in the beginning, everything from large vertebrates, dinosaurs and whales, to teeny tiny microfossils. Here is a piece of a coral that actually is a rock. So it's not a coral anymore, it's a coral pseudomorph. Actually, we could say it's a mineral. So the coral itself is a fossil, it's been replaced by minerals. And this piece is actually from Florida, which is where I grew up. So it's kind of one of my favorite sections of the collection. But
can you both tell me a little bit about your access to the sea and the ocean? You both work with marine collections and in marine science of sorts. Did you always love water and the ocean? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Maybe Alice?
Yeah, so I grew up really close to my grandparents, and so they are from an island in my country called Isla de Margarita. And I'm going to take 1 minute to say, I saw in a comment someone saying about my accent. I'm actually from Venezuela. That is a country in the north of South America. So I grew up spending my summers with my grandparents in this island. So I was always curious about how organisms live on the water, because we are so out of that world, right? So I was like, how do they breathe? How do they eat? How does that happen? For me, it was really a mystery since I was a child. So I was always interested about it, but at the same time, no one in my family is a scientist. So I was just reflecting with a friend yesterday about it. Like, I didn't understand what a scientist was until I understood that I was a scientist. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, I was always interested about life on the water, but living close to it, but just afterwards is when I initially want to be a medical doctor, but I ended up being a different kind of doctor, I guess.
A coral doctor, a nidariologist, right?
Pardon?
I think, are you a nidariologist? Is that
yes,
coral
exactly,
doctor? Yeah. Exactly. And Chrissy, what about you? You grew up near Florida. Did you spend a lot of time at the beach looking for shark's teeth and wondering what's out there?
Yeah, constantly. So I love that Melanie and Sue are so into soil, and that's their realm. I was obsessed with sand and the ocean. I was like not that kid who, I could have sand all over my body. I didn't care. Sand in the bed sheets is fine with me. I really I don't have a problem with it. I used to drive my mom nuts at the beach because I would swim out so far, like as a little kid, like jumping over waves. And yeah, it was a wonderful place to grow up, to explore. and look for shells and shark's teeth, like you mentioned. And then in the middle of the state of Florida, where you think it's, you know, just land, I remember going on trips there, and there'd be quarries, and then here are these giant coral reefs in the middle of the state and huge megalodon teeth. And that blew my mind. It's like, well, wait. So it wasn't always like this. So how is there an ocean here? And that pushed me into geology. But kind of like LA and, you know, so many people we know who end up wherever they end up in science, I thought that I wanted to be an ocean engineer. And then I was like, wait, differential equations is a prerequisite? Well, let me wind that one back. So I ended up going marine geology route.
And you know, the title micropaleontologist, does that mean you can grab a handful of sand, or you can shake out whatever is in your bathing suit or whatever, and look at it under a microscope and see ancient life? Like, what can you find?
I have some sand for you here.
Okay.
I'm like off camera. All right. So here's some sand that I collected many years ago. It's in a little jar. This is from a little tiny island called Pulau Karimanjat in the Mentawai Islands in Indonesia. You put this under a microscope, there's an entire world in here. Wow. And so this is the way in my graduate work that I engaged in studying coral reefs, was looking at the communities that you could see under the microscope, because they were excellent indicators of everything that was going on up above. So I studied foraminifera. So that's a particular, so foraminifera are single-celled, or they're protists, and they build a shell out of calcium carbonate. But they also host algal symbionts, very much like corals do, right? Scleractinian corals. But their life cycle is so much shorter. So we know corals can be very, very long-lived. And once a coral is impacted to the point where it's severely stressed or dying, you're kind of probably beyond a tipping point there. It's not to say it can't tip back, but you can see the impacts to these environments on much shorter timescales by looking at and studying foraminifera. And there are people all over the world who are doing this in different areas. So that's how I ended up specializing in micropaleontology. And it was just, I guess it worked out great because I loved sand anyway, and everything that, you know, I'm kind of collecting off of some of these areas, you know, it's already dead. I'm not worried about snakes. I'm not worried about crazy bacterial infections, although I did get one of those out in Indonesia. No. But so here are some images of what foraminifera look like, magnified underneath a microscope. And the ones that you're seeing here are fossil. These are actually from California. They are part of a very large collection of microfossils that we have here. And one of our microfossil collections is the former micropaleontological collection of Union Oil of California. And so it represents over 100 years of oil exploration in the state of California and some of beyond. But it's information that's not readily accessible or publicly available. So we're working really hard to try to analyze what's in these collections and get the data out there, because it's basically a treasure trove.
Gosh, you know, I think
that's how I ended up here.
I understand. Like, I would want to look at this stuff through a microscope all day long. I think it's interesting that we think of science and we think of a lot of data and figures and lab coats and numbers, but it looks like both of your work is also extraordinarily beautiful. And, you know, Chrissy, you mentioned something about Ali, her field work that you were a little envious of, and I would love to know. I would love to know, Dr. Hernandez, what is your field work like? I mean, is your business casual, like neoprene up to the neck? Like, what are you out there with stingrays?
Like
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, full neoprene. I actually am. I'm into tech diver. I'm a tech diver. So I use a rebreather. I got certified a year and a half ago. And for that equipment allows me to go deeper than the recreational limits of scuba diving. It's heavy, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. And So recently we have been doing field work in Curacao. That's where I'm actually, those pictures you're seeing now are from Curacao, where I'm currently doing my work. And I'm working with a particular species called Helioceres cuculata, also known as the sunrise lettuce coral. And yeah, a normal day is waking up pretty early because putting together that equipment takes time. And you have to do it really carefully because it's a dangerous machine. So you have to make sure it's properly prepared. That takes time and it cannot be rushed. So once you're that ready, get into the neoprene, go to the water, and that dive can take anything from 2 to 4 or 5 hours, depending on how deep we go. On the water, it's the best time, of course, these days, because I'm working with this coral, which is rare, which means it's really low, it's declining, and so it's really small populations out there. We have to search for it. So I see my work as a sort of like a video game, like I'm swimming and looking for that coral, and we swim back and forth. So it's tiring as well, so we do a lot of swimming. And then once we come out of the water, usually I have samples, have to preserve, go to the station, wash all the equipment, get everything, all the data we have safe. And get prepared for the next day. Yeah, that's me. I was doing the extraction that day. So we try to do some of the extractions there. So part of my work is also combining different tools like photogrammetry, genomics, bioinformatics, a lot of field work, which is really fun because I have a lot of hats to wear. So yeah, it's busy.
Have you ever had the opportunity to see a species that you didn't know about before, or either from a microbe or fossil level?
Yes. Surprisingly, I would say that there is a species I'm working on because it's so rare and it's cryptic. Like it likes little crevices and cave. Mm-hmm. So it's a challenge to find it, but I'm excited. I'm working with it because how rare it is. Mm. So yeah, not so much about, I have to say, I have a funny story about fossils and forams, because I have a good friend that works with forams, and once in the Bradbury Reef, I was helping her, and she has to sample forams, and she's like, okay, so you have to wrap a piece of rubble and see, and you will see them, they're really obvious, and this is me 12, 20 minutes with the same piece of rubble. Like, I don't see anything. Like, can you show me? She's like, yeah, it's full. This is all in the water, right? Like, we cannot talk. She's like, full. And I'm like, okay, no idea. I didn't see anything. That's the closest I have been with forams.
Come down to my lab and I'll sit you under the microscope. For sure.
Yeah. Do you ever get to, Chrissy, see any species that haven't maybe been identified yet?
Oh, yes.
Really?
Yeah. So that's one of the beauties of collections. So oftentimes, and especially historically, researchers have been focused on a specific taxa when they go out and collect, but that doesn't mean that's all that they collect is what they know. They're collecting things that they don't know, and it really takes a long time to actually identify a new species and confirm that it's a new species and properly write it up and publish it. So given the fact that we maybe know of about 10% of the species on the planet, and there's so much left to be discovered, that is not only true in nature, but it's also true in our collections. And we find new species in our collections all of the time. So it's really a big part of my job to put information out there, not just about what we know we have, but what we're not really sure about, and provide all of the extra information that we can. And sometimes that's images. It's like, wait, here's this thing. We can only identify it to family level. We have no idea anything else about it. And putting it out there to the community so that they can use our collections as a resource. So many scientists, students, the whole gamut utilizes our collections and are discovering new species in our collections all the time.
And isn't it wild that people just started getting digital cameras like 10, 15 years ago, and the idea that you can now share something from someone across the globe, like, anyone know what this little tiny snail is? Like, there
and
can
it's
be
so
someone
hot right now with the pandemic, because it's like, hey, I can't come to you, but I heard you have this, and can you go dig through and find like everything and take a picture of it? And a lot of the original species descriptions are hand drawn, and sometimes they're sort of like a weird hodgepodge of two different specimens that they drew together because only part of it was preserved. This is especially true for fossils. So it's like, wait, does that even really exist as a one physical? There's like constant mysteries and little breadcrumb trails, and it's fun, but it's
like a big puzzle with a lot of little tiny pieces.
Totally.
I think that's what's so beautiful is when you actually get to talk to a scientist and talk to them about their work, understanding that science isn't a big institution where they know everything and you open it up and say, here's the knowledge, it's all in here. It's like, no, it's a process and it's evolving and growing and adding and subtracting. And I also just really appreciate that that you're both naming all of your species after me. I think that's really nice of you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. Not sure. Do you get to, when you, let's say, like Ali, let's say that this little thing that lives in crevices, you do find out it's a new species. Do you have an idea who you might name it for? Do you get to do that?
Maybe I will.
Not after me, but is there someone that you...
Well, yeah, I'll think about it. Yeah, well, hopefully I'll be able, I would love to put a name to one of a coral species. I'll keep your name around.
You don't have to do mine. You don't have to do mine. I feel like if you have a dog or a cat, that goes way, a mentor, a hero, a lot of people on the list before you get to me. But that is so exciting that that both of you have seen species that we've never really identified and put a name to. Like, you're at the forefront. You're like space explorers, but for the sea and the past. And I think that's amazing. And we get to now join up with our other guests. So we get to talk to Dr. Malone and Dr. Pierre and kind of all have a little fireside chat with all of us. And there we go. Yay! It's almost like we're hanging out at the museum on a Thursday with cocktails and probably fewer of us wearing shoes right now than we would be if we were at the museum. I know for me, I'm not, but it's been so great to talk to you and get to understand a little bit about your fields. And I would love to hear, and I know I already asked this, of Dr. Malone and Dr. Pierre, but Ali and Chrissy, if you have any advice that you would give to other people or to your former selves, just as early career scientists.
Well, I can go first. I have one that I actually still tell, like I say to myself every day, that is enjoy. Because we sometimes get so caught up in, are we doing enough? Are we good enough? Are we having good ideas? And can be overwhelming, right? And in that process, we forget about enjoying this opportunity to talk with 3 other amazing scientists and an amazing podcaster. I guess that's the right word. By the way, big fan of your work. Enjoy, right? Like enjoy and get to collaborate with others, learn from others, go out of your comfort zone. That's what I will advise myself years ago and still do to myself every day. Yeah.
That's great.
That's great. Ali, that's beautiful advice for anyone, anywhere doing anything. I think I would just say, like, keep your mind open, keep your eyes open, keep your heart open, because especially when you're early on, I do believe that the right opportunities come to you organically. But if you're not open, you're not going to see them. And don't be afraid. And I have to tell myself that all the time, like, don't be afraid, because that is something that I struggle with. And then I realize, wow, I'm not the only one who struggles with that at all. Like, don't be afraid to fail. You're going to fail. Chrissy, remember that you're going to fail. I'm going to fail this week. I'll probably fail tomorrow. I'll probably fail tonight when I try to put my daughter to bed. It's just, you know, yeah.
But that's part of science is you don't learn unless you fail. That's part of an experiment, would you say? Yeah, that's how you learn, right? I think that's something that so many of us think scientists have the answers. Again, immaculate white coat, they know what's up, and you don't realize that every scientific revelation is because there were failures along the way that got you to that, which is that science is a process and not, it's more of a verb than a noun, probably.
Yes. Totally.
And what about, can any of you, this is a great time if you want to shout out a mentor you had, or if you want to give advice about being a mentor. Anyone have an experience with a mentor that really changed things for you? An open floor here.
I feel like I've had so many mentors. I feel like everyone that I've ever worked with has mentored me in some way. I've learned from them. Even people that I mentor, I learn from, and they mentor me. Yeah. So I think it again just goes back to like open mind, open eyes, open heart. There's so much to learn from everyone all around you all the time. So my graduate advisor, Anton Olenek, Dr. O, you're the best. My curator, Peter Rupnerine, I love you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Everybody that I work with at the Academy. I mean, there's so many people, so many. All of my fellow collection managers here. We have a good team. So that's another advice to an early career scientist. Have a good village. Be in a lab where people support each other. Competition's okay, but you have to be with people who lift each other up. Like I hear these horror stories about sabotage. That's no good. That's not science. That's not the way science needs to be done today to answer the questions that we need to answer today. So run for the hills if you see that.
That's
if
great
you're looking
advice.
at graduate schools, whatever. Yeah, that's
a good advice. Like to my interns, I usually advise, like if you're looking for a grad opportunity, a lab in particular, like always email the past students, right? Like alumni from that lab, postdoc from that lab. How is it work? It's a good environment. It's supportive. Do I have opportunity? It's a good team. It's a friendly environment to learn, to make mistakes. So I totally agree with Chrissy.
Yeah. What about?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Allie.
Oh yeah, I was just going to call on you. So there you go.
Well, I guess I would follow up by saying like all of that. Yes, all of that. And I would back up even more if there are any listeners who are even before the stage of considering graduate school. I know that I wasn't even sure that I would go into a PhD program right away or if I would do it at all. But I want to shout out some peer mentors. I had some amazing mentors who were senior to me and professors, but I actually just really appreciate the village of just keeping people close who encourage you and respect your curiosity. I think that even if those people don't do the same work as you, if people can see that your intellectual curiosity is valuable and is organic, that keeps you going. And that's a type of fuel that I think you can't really find even as you advance in your career. So even if you're in high school or an undergraduate, keep people close who value your drive and your curiosity. Shout out to Brooklyn Hitchens, my first roommate. She is also a sociologist now and is amazing. So
you're gonna have to send her a link to this.
Oh yeah, she may be watching. She's the best.
And what about you, Melanie?
Yeah, I echo a lot of the things that have already been said. One of the tips I was given by a mentor, and that's one of many mentors, was always have a shadow committee of folks that support you. And even if they're not your formal like advisor for your graduate degree of any type, having other people that work or do work that you want to do and giving you those resources is really important, because a lot of the times you'll be in this and you won't find that person, and it may take you a long time to find that person, and they may not be in your school. And so finding other people that do work that inspires you is really, really important. And I also, I could go on for forever, but I just have a lot of, of things about friends and your colleagues and so forth, because academia can be so toxic sometimes, and you get into your own head thinking about, you know, a lot of the things that people have already mentioned about uncertainty, and if you have good ideas and if you're smart enough to do these things, and then that can also get compounded by things that people tell you, whether or not it's intentional or not. And so having good friend networks, having mentors outside of the academy, all those things, it really takes a village to get where we've been.
And I'm going to add something. Sorry. It gives perspective as well, because we get so caught up. Like, you step back and it's like, well, there's actually life out of this little world, you know, and it's so diverse and different. So it's I agree.
And, you know, this is a question I've thought about a lot too, and it might be tough to answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because I think it's a valuable discussion to have. But you know, especially being women in science, and oftentimes you know, if there are fewer of you in a field, it's beneficial if you show up, because if you can see it, you can be it, you can bring other people into the field. But at the same time, you're dealing with your own workload, and being a scientist who is doing great work and really succeeding, and then on top of that, having the honor and the burden of showing up and being that representative. How do you all balance that from a workload and from an emotional perspective without wearing yourself out? It's a big question, but I'm asking it because I think it's important.
Yeah, I'll go ahead first, because I just came off fresh of an experience where I did a reply all where I didn't think I was replying all, but then I was like, well, I stand by what I said. And so, yeah, you know, I mean, we have these moments all the time where we're advocating for each other or saying, you know, something about that. And, you know, I literally just had one of those moments, and I was like, well, it's fine. Like, I feel really exposed, but I still, like, it's no secret that I feel these ways, right? And so it is a really heavy burden. I don't, like, especially because I'm in two already marginalized category, women in science, African-American women in science, it's already a lot. And there's many days I do not have the strength to say and repeat the things that I've told other people. And I'm just like, nope, not doing it today. But on the days that I can, I try to impart knowledge and helpful tips to those that are also, you know, going through the same struggles. And so in general, I would just say, be kind to yourself, because it's no thing that you're going to be able to solve all the world's problems in one day. You might be able to impact one person, and if that is the case, that is lovely and wonderful, and you've done your part. So, yeah.
That's great advice. Anyone else, Sue?
I guess I would say similar things to Melanie, but I guess I'd add that being a Black woman in science is honestly a different experience than just being a woman in general in science. And I think Melanie's kind of articulating that, you know, it's a double burden in a way. But I actually really get a lot of energy from that experience, because it allows me to see folks who exist in the margins of our disciplines. And I'm really lucky to see them. I'm actually delighted to be someone that I get to kind of reach out to and be reached out to, undergraduates and master's students who are like, there actually isn't anyone like me where I'm at. And I'm constantly kind of being mentored by the people that I mentor. So definitely take breaks. I'm trying not to do labor for free anymore. I don't know, shout out to anybody else who's just like, please pay me. But yeah, I like all of the free talks and all of the free classroom visits. It feels like a responsibility, and I'm sure all of you like know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm trying to also, you know, kind of be good to myself by saying, hey, my time is valuable, and I have to give it for free to people who really, really need it. So that's how I look at it.
Well said. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that you know, Melanie and Sue have made excellent points, some of which I have no experience with, because I'm not a Black woman, and I have not dealt with what you've had to deal with. We all came up in geosciences. We know geosciences is the least diverse STEM field that there is, and we are pushing really, really hard, some of us, to change that. So for Sue, I think you said a really good thing about like taking breaks. Mentoring is a priority for me, and I'm fortunate that I'm in a place where for most people here, mentoring is a priority, outreach, training the next generation, providing opportunity for people who don't have opportunity. That's a priority. But at the same time, you need people to put their money where their mouth is. If that's a priority, then evaluate me as part of that. It's compartmentalized too much right now, right? So if we say these are our values and we say these are our goals, we've got to hold people's feet to the fire and say, okay, well, then I need recognition for this. You don't need to give me a cookie. I don't need a pat on the back. But when you're looking at the spectrum of work that I do, this needs to be included in it. And then, but it can be exhausting. I'm going to give a shout out to our careers in science program here at the Academy. I was lucky to get roped into a project back in 2014 with a good friend and colleague of mine, Sheo Matsuda. And it was the best experience ever. And I've been able to work with the careers in science students who are high school students from underserved communities here in San Francisco. And it's awesome. It's like the best, but it is tiring. And there are times I've had to say, like, I can't do it this semester because I need to regenerate and be a good mentor when I'm being a mentor. So I don't, that's really long-winded answer.
No, that's great. It's all about boundaries and a little bit of money, please, for my work. Yeah.
Just see it, right? You're just like, just seeing it,
Absolutely. For people who speak about diversity and inclusion on my podcast, I always pay them an extra honorarium for that because that's lived experience that they're providing. And if anyone ever gets asked to do something for free, they're not sure how to say, how will you pay me? Just say, is there an honorarium for this? It's a great way of saying, and what will you be paying me for my work? So that is a good way to ask.
It's good advice.
And we got a lot of questions from people who are watching, and one thing that came from a lot of people, and this is going to be a little bit hard to answer, but maybe you can, everyone working in geoscience is what you know about everything from the earth to the sea. What hopes do you have about our ability to heal the earth and to really use science to make progress? One tip that you could give a viewer who cares about the original woman in science, Mother Earth, if you will. What would I know? That's clearly that's like a fairy tale look at it. But if you could give someone advice or some hope about what we can do, what would it be?
I'm going to wait because I have so much to say. I'm actually just like, let me not.
Go, Sue, go, Sue.
Yeah, I should go. You think go, Sue?
Yeah,
okay.
Spill it.
So I, as I said before, I'm a biogeochemist. I study kind of ecology and global change. And I know that others in this conversation think about that too. And so I think that for me, my hope and also my aspiration in my career is to figure out kind of how the ways that humans, our ideologies, the ways that our societies operate are really directly linked to what really got us into this mess in the first place. I think that neglecting those connections between how climate change has happened and also how different aspects of the environment are being harmed by human activities, it's just super deeply tied to who we are as people and how our societies operate. And that includes racial justice, that includes gender and sexuality, it includes histories of colonialism and imperialism. My work is really focused on taking what we know, the fundamentals about biogeochemistry, nutrients, elements, and soil, and connecting it back to these bigger questions. So my hope is that if we learn more about why we've done what we've done and how it's affected the planet, we might actually start to change society, and that might have positive effects for the environment.
So change people first. Get us in the right mindset. That's great advice. Anyone else?
I have a little one.
Yeah, bring it on.
Vote consciously, like vote for someone that care about everything that Sue just said.
Whoa. Do what Ollie said.
Vote consciously. One last question from a viewer. They say, if funds and time, etc., were not an issue, what research questions would you tackle? Would it be ocean aliens? Would it be?
What's the tipping point? That's my question. What's the tipping point? What is the global tipping point? Have we passed it? Where is it? What do we need to do? We need to build solutions around. If it could answer anything, that would be it.
I think because I'm always gravitate towards contaminants and chemicals, and I constantly lecture on all the different things that we don't know we're affected by with chemicals, everything from like obesity to low fertility rates to, do I have cancer because I lived in this place? I would like spend millions and millions of dollars on finding out that to give people justice in that area.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think when it comes to health, I think we know like we've passed that tipping point, right? Like we know we've done irreprehensible damage.
And I think on that note, I love to think about, like I said, microbes as pumps and microbes as really Earth's tools in so many ways. I mean, they kind of set up ecosystems before there were plants and animals. And I'm very curious about sort of the coevolution of microbial ecology and human ecology. So, how did the movement of people across the planet, the formation of societies, how did that work kind of in tandem with where microbes are and what they do? I think that's like my burning question.
Yeah. Allie?
I have similar question for that Christy mentioned, especially for coral reef. We may probably pass that tipping point, which is sad. So having said that, like I have another question that is not necessarily that close, but I work with deep corals as well, mesophotic. So I'm kind of curious to explore that a bit further down. And what's the diversity? What's that alien coral? How do they make it to live there in those environments that are so extreme? That would be my question.
I love that there are microbes and coral out there that don't even know that they're like the object of your burning curiosity and affection.
Yeah, we're just out here stressing about them.
And before I send you back to Christina and Lynn, I wanted to ask each of you a tough question, but what is your favorite thing about being a scientist? Your favorite thing, the thing that just gets you out of bed, helps you on under-caffeinated days, gives you butterflies still. Is there a moment or an aspect of it that you just absolutely love? Chrissy, I see you nodding.
I'll go. So because I do manage a collection and my work is less about my own personal research, it's actually really not about that anymore. It's really about facilitating other people's research, but also disseminating information to everyone and making that information accessible and equitable. That's what drives me, is like being that conduit for information and hopefully inspiring people. So like going back to the previous question, I think another, not necessarily a research question, but maybe it is like, how do you change hearts and minds, engage people and empower them to make the changes that they want to see? I feel like what I get to do is one step in that direction, because I hopefully am giving them the information that they need to answer all of their questions, so that they can contribute back to society and nature in the way that we really need people to do.
That's so inspiring. Anyone else? Melanie?
Yeah, there's two for me. I really, from young age, knew I had to be outdoors. And so I appreciate that I've gone into a career where I can be outside all the time and enjoy nature and get a fulfilling day out of it and feel a sense of accomplishment. And so it's a good day for me when I come back dirt covered. It's great. But there's also the creativity aspect, and that I don't have to do. I mean, there's of course all things with job requirements where I have to do certain things, but really being a scientist, you get to make up your own questions. You get really invested in things you want to learn about. You know, you explore them the way you want to, and there's a real satisfaction in that for me. I would be a horrible desk clerk of any sort. I just would never behave. And so so this is a really fulfilling career for me in a lot of ways. And so I think going back to Ali's comment just about enjoy, I mean, even today when I was thinking like, oh, I get to talk with folks and look at people's pictures, I was just, it was really satisfactory. And you know, there's a lot of great things about being a scientist. So I think it's a great blessing.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna continue if it's okay.
Yeah.
So I also have two things. The first one is that diversity of activities that we get to do. So there's no way you're gonna get bored. There's so many hats to wear. And also I have to say that I'm still the version of my childhood still intrigued about how these, particularly corals, right? How do they make it? How do they live? How do they persist in time? And how can we help them to stay there for many more years? That's what gets me out of bed and what makes me happy about my job.
Yeah, great. What about you, Sue?
Yeah, these people have basically summed up my entire like day-to-day motivations. But I guess in addition to being able to go outside, I get to dig in the dirt, I get to mess around with plants, and I get to do fun chemistry in the lab. I think the diversity of activities is really it for me. I've thought about doing other jobs like very fleetingly. Like I was like, maybe. And then I was like, oh no. Because it's just like, I get to code and then I get to dig in the soil and I get to give a talk and I get to make a pretty PowerPoint. And all of the switching that you get to do in your brain is like what keeps me sharp and what keeps me excited about the work. And I think it's just a superpower that you can use to serve the earth and people. And that's really a gift to me. So.
Thank you so much for asking the questions that you all do and from the perspectives that you have, because you really are going down paths that are so important to all of us. And the fact that you're all there doing your research and asking those questions and showing up and helping other people also get over their imposter syndrome, which so many women have. It's always the wrong people who have imposter syndrome. You've never
Yeah.
So it's like
no comment.
You know what I mean? So he's like the most brilliant, thoughtful people that are like, what if I'm not enough? And you're like, you're the most. So thank you so much for asking the questions that you ask of science and then letting me ask the people who ask the great questions, if that makes sense. So thank you so much for letting me be here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for all of your great work and keep doing what you're doing. And I'm going to turn it over now. I hate to say goodbye. It's like a year. It was too long before coming back here. But Christina and Lynn, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank you so much for letting me ask you questions.
Thank you, Ali.
Thanks, Ali.
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Thank you so much to everyone now in our green room, but special thank you to Ali, Sue, Melanie, Chrissy, Alejandra. That was an amazing conversation. I think there were a lot of questions asked and we could probably spend all night asking more. But I know Christine and I loved it. We were chatting behind the scenes. I really like the OG woman of science comment, just a note. But I also want to give a shout out to Catherine Piatek and Shannon Bennett, who also helped us put together this program. So thank you. This was a special one for me and Christina. So we're excited to have that. Next week, we are talking wolves. We're going to be talking about wolf ecology, how they moved back into California, ghost genes, coastal wolves. So come back next week to learn all about one of North America's most iconic terrestrial mammals.
Yeah, everything that Lynn said. That was just like very thrilling for us to listen to too. And like this time we didn't have to be on screen as much, so we could just like kind of watch as viewers. So anyway, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll be notified when we come back every Thursday at 7 p.m. for night school. And it's exciting because today I actually get to tell you all some good news, which is that the Academy is reopening to the public finally on March 17th. So if you're in the Bay Area, we'd love to welcome you back. We'll let you know as soon as we can about when our first nightlife is actually going to be back in the building. But like I said, until then, you can find us here every week on Night School. Yeah, and if you're comfortable doing so and you're doing these programs, we're still relying on all of your generous support after nearly 12 months of closure. So there's a link to the Academy Resilience Fund that supports all our work. It's in the YouTube description. So anyway, until next week, have a wonderful night. Thanks so much again for joining us, and thanks to our amazing guests.